It's every parent's nightmare. Your child goes to school, expecting a day full of learning, making friends, and staying safe. But what if something completely unexpected happens, something that shakes you to your core? Imagine your daughter, who's already fighting a hard battle every single day, being pushed around by someone who should have been her ally. It sounds unbelievable, right? But that's exactly what happened when a fellow student, pushed a girl in a wheelchair with such force that it made headlines across the nation. It wasn't just the act itself that sparked outrage, it was the shocking response from the school that followed. This story isn't just about one incident. It's about how society reacts when the unthinkable happens. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll be questioning everything you thought you knew about school safety, bullying, and justice. You'll want to see what happens next, I promise you that. So let's dive in. Picture the scene, a quiet, normal school day. The bell rings, students flood the hallways, and the chatter of young voices fills the air. In the middle of all this, there's one girl, sitting in her wheelchair, navigating the crowded hallway with the kind of grace that only someone with years of experience could have. Her name? Emily. She's no stranger to challenges. She faces a disability that requires her to rely on a wheelchair, but she's not one to let that stop her. Emily's resilience is the kind of thing that makes people stop and take notice. She's a fighter. She's also one of the kindest, most caring souls you'll ever meet. But what happened to Emily that day was something no one saw coming. No one except the teen who decided to take matters into his own hands. It started as an ordinary school day. Emily was navigating the crowded hallways, trying to get to her next class. She didn't expect any trouble, as she had always been respected by her peers. She had a small group of friends, and while some students would give her the occasional awkward glance, for the most part, Emily's school life was as peaceful as it could be for a young girl facing a disability. But that day, everything changed. A teenager, whose name we'll get to in just a bit, approached Emily in the hallway. He was just like every other kid, trying to navigate the social maze of high school. But something about that moment was different. Without warning, he pushed Emily's wheelchair hard. It wasn't just a gentle push. It was an aggressive shove, one that sent Emily's chair skidding across the hallway.
People gasped.
Emily was caught off guard. She didn't know what to say or do. She just sat there, stunned and shaking. Now, you might be wondering, why did he do it? What could possibly have driven a teenager to do something so shocking and unprovoked? You're not alone in asking these questions. In the days that followed, many speculated. Was it a prank gone wrong? Was it a moment of thoughtless aggression? Or was there something more to the story that no one was talking about? That's where things take a twist you wouldn't expect. When the incident was reported to the school, the response was, to say the least, underwhelming. The teen responsible? He didn't face immediate consequences. Instead, there was a bizarre series of events that followed. The school's response was puzzling. Some said it was too lenient, others argued it was too harsh. What no one expected was the way the school attempted to brush the incident under the rug. And when the story made its way to the media, the public outcry was swift and loud. Parents, teachers, students, and even activists all weighed in. They all wanted to know, how could this happen and why didn't the school do more to protect Emily? Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The school's response, what they said and what they didn't say, became the center of a national conversation. Was the school turning a blind eye to bullying? Or was there something more sinister at play? One thing was clear, the situation was far from over. As the controversy grew, so did the pressure on the school district to act. It wasn't just about one girl in a wheelchair anymore. It was about the responsibility. We all have to protect our children.
It was about accountability.
It was about ensuring that schools remain safe places for everyone, regardless of their abilities or background. But before we jump ahead, let's pause for a moment and think about the broader implications of this story. What does this incident say about how we, as a society, handle situations involving disabilities? How do we respond when someone in a vulnerable position is harmed? And most importantly, how do we balance fairness with justice in a school setting? These are questions that Emily's story raises, and they're questions that will continue to echo in the media for months to come. The answers? Well, they're coming, and they're not what you might expect. Now, we're about to get to the heart of the story, the aftermath, the fallout, and the unexpected twist that no one saw coming. This isn't just a story about one girl and one push. This is about how a community, a school, and a society at large respond when the worst happens. But don't go anywhere just yet. Stay tuned because the shocking details of what happened next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about justice in schools. What happened to the teen who pushed Emily? And how did the school finally respond to the growing pressure? You'll want to know the answer to these questions. Keep watching because the truth is about to come out. Emily had always been the kind of girl who didn't like attention. She kept her circle tight, her thoughts private, and her emotions tucked safely behind a calm, composed smile. But beneath that smile was a young woman who had already endured more than most kids her age. After a car accident left her paralyzed from the waist down at just 11 years old, she was forced to grow up faster than her peers. While other kids worried about popularity or school dances, Emily was learning to adapt to physical therapy routines, wheelchair maneuvering, and the constant sting of being different in a world that never quite knew how to treat her. Despite all of this, she didn't wallow in self-pity. She pushed forward, literally and figuratively. That was what made the incident in the hallway so devastating. For someone who fought so hard just to be seen as normal, being targeted like that was not just a physical attack. It was an emotional blow that threatened to undo years of quiet resilience. In the weeks leading up to the incident, things had seemed relatively normal for Emily, at least on the surface. She was excelling in her literature class, working on a group project about civil rights and justice. Ironically, she had just presented a report on the power of standing up for the voiceless in society, a presentation that earned her praise from her teacher and a few silent nods of respect from classmates who rarely paid much attention to her otherwise. Outside the classroom, Emily spent time in the art room during lunch, where she found comfort in sketching, often drawing quiet portraits of people she saw in the halls, some smiling, some brooding, all caught in moments of unnoticed vulnerability. Her sketchbook was the one place she poured her truth, and while few had ever seen its contents, those who had knew that Emily understood people in a way that made them feel seen. But like any school, the social dynamics at Jefferson High were complicated. Cliques ruled certain corridors, and unspoken hierarchies determined who sat where in the cafeteria. Emily didn't fit neatly into any category, but she had a few close friends who orbited the social middle ground. Her best friend, Jasmine, had known her since 4th grade. Jasmine was loyal, outspoken, and fiercely protective, never afraid to call someone out if they stepped out of line. Then there was Luis, a quiet boy from her art class who rarely spoke unless it was about comics or film scores. Together, the three formed an unlikely but tight-knit trio. But recently, there had been a subtle shift. Emily had noticed odd glances from students she didn't normally interact with, whispers that stopped the moment she rolled past, and one morning, a crude drawing left taped to her locker, a childish scribble of a wheelchair with a big red X over it. Emily told no one. She'd dealt with worse. But maybe she shouldn't have kept that to herself. Maybe that was the first sign that something deeper, something darker, was brewing. Now, let's talk about the boy, Jason Miller. A junior with a strong presence in the school's sports scene, Jason was known as the star linebacker for the football team. He wasn't the school bully. He wasn't even on most teachers' radar for causing trouble. In fact, many described him as charismatic, polite, even charming when he wanted to be. But lately, Jason had been under pressure. His performance on the field had been slipping. Rumors swirled that a college scout had pulled out of an upcoming visit due to concerns about Jason's recent attitude in the locker room. His father, a former athlete turned local real estate mogul, was known for pushing Jason hard. Too hard, some said. It was clear Jason was carrying something, but no one expected that his frustrations would explode the way they did that day in the hallway. Or did they? Because here's where things start getting murky. In the immediate aftermath, witnesses gave conflicting accounts. Some claimed they saw Jason deliberately approach Emily, exchange words with her, and then shove her without provocation. Others insisted it looked more like a prank gone wrong, that Jason had simply meant to surprise her or move her faster as a joke. One student, who asked to remain anonymous, said they heard Emily say something to Jason just moments before the push, something that seemed to rattle him. But no one could agree on what was said. And the school? Their version of events was even more confusing. Initially, they described the incident as a minor altercation, refusing to use the word bullying or assault. That vague phrasing ignited a firestorm of backlash online. Parents demanded clarity. The media began circling. Hashtags like #JusticeForEmily and #PushForTruth began trending on YouTube and Twitter, drawing the attention of disability rights groups and education watchdogs. Then came the twist that threw everything into question. A surveillance camera in the hallway had recorded the moment of the push. But according to the school, that footage couldn't be released due to privacy concerns. That only made things worse. If the footage proved it was an accident, why not release it? And if it showed something more disturbing, what exactly was the school trying to hide? Speculation ran wild. Conspiracy theories surfaced. Some claimed Jason's father had pulled strings with the school board. Others believed the footage might show something even more shocking. Perhaps Emily wasn't the only one involved. Perhaps there were others manipulating events behind the scenes. And then there's Emily herself. In the days that followed, she retreated from social media, skipped school, and gave no public comment. Not even Jasmine knew where she had gone. Some whispered that Emily had said something that triggered Jason, something personal. Others questioned whether Emily had been the intended target at all. Could it have been a case of mistaken identity? Or maybe, just maybe, Emily knew something about Jason that he desperately wanted to keep secret. At this point, the story was no longer about a push. It was about what that push had uncovered. A crack in the surface of a school that prided itself on inclusion, excellence, and safety. But what lay beneath that surface? That's the question no one could quite answer yet. And as more voices began to speak out, teachers who feared retaliation, students with stories of overlooked harassment, and parents who began organizing town hall meetings, the pressure on the school grew. Still, the truth remained buried. But the closer we look, the more pieces of the puzzle begin to take shape. The whispers in the hallway, the silence from Emily, the school's reluctance to release the footage, and the uncomfortable expression on Jason's face when reporters finally caught up with him. Something wasn't adding up. And if you think this story couldn't get more complicated, just wait. Because someone else is about to step forward, and what they reveal might flip everything you think you know upside down. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get more confusing, another curveball hit, this time from inside the school itself. Over the weekend, Emily decided to return. Quietly. No warning, no public statement, no fuss. Jasmine had been the one to convince her to come back, promising that the situation was starting to settle and that people were slowly rallying behind her. But the moment Emily wheeled into the main corridor Monday morning, it was clear things were far from normal. Students parted like the Red Sea, not out of respect, but out of uncertainty. Some stared too long. Others looked away too fast. Whispers buzzed through lockers and backpacks, and when Emily rolled up to her first class, she noticed it immediately. The tension wasn't just between her and the rest of the students. It was hanging in the air like a storm about to break. And then, after lunch, she found the note. It was slipped inside her locker. No envelope, no signature. Just 5 words scribbled in sharp, uneven handwriting on a torn piece of binder paper. Stop asking. You're not safe. That was the moment Emily realized that someone, maybe more than one person, didn't want her uncovering what really happened. She showed the note to Jasmine, whose face drained of color. They debated reporting it, but something told them the school wouldn't act. After all, they still hadn't released the hallway footage, and their latest statement had only made things worse, calling the incident a community misunderstanding and pledging to foster empathy on all sides. That kind of polished nothing-speak didn't sit right with Emily. So she and Jasmine decided to take matters into their own hands. If the school wouldn't hand over the footage, maybe someone who worked there would. That's where Mr. Tannen came in, the school's IT technician. He was in his late 40s, socially awkward, and usually ignored unless someone's email wasn't loading or a projector went down mid-lesson. But Jasmine had a cousin in senior year who'd once overheard Mr. Tannen complaining about how much access he had to the school's security systems and how little anyone cared. Emily and Jasmine approached him after school, gently probing with questions about the security camera systems and whether anything had been accidentally deleted. At first, Mr. Tannen brushed them off, nervously adjusting his glasses and mumbling something about not wanting to get involved in drama. But then, before turning away, he leaned in and whispered something neither of them expected. "I saw the footage. That push wasn't what they said it was." That was enough to send their adrenaline spiking. But before they could ask more, Mr. Tannen turned on his heel and disappeared into the faculty lounge. When they came back the next day to press him further, he was gone. On sick leave, they were told. Indefinitely. Just like that, the one person who might have confirmed their suspicions had vanished, and so had something else. Emily's sketchbook. She'd left it in the art room the previous afternoon, as she always did when staying late. But now it was missing. Not in the classroom. Not in the lost and found.
Gone.
And inside that sketchbook, dozens of her drawings, including one she'd done the week before the push, a sketch of Jason. Not just any sketch. It was detailed, personal, and raw. Emily had drawn him looking exhausted and angry, caught in a moment she'd seen outside the gym, when he thought no one was watching. She hadn't shown it to anyone, but if someone had seen that drawing, especially Jason, it might explain why he'd snapped. Or it might mean someone took it to keep it from ever being seen again. Things spiraled from there. Emily began noticing changes around her. Teachers suddenly started watching her a little too closely. Her emails to administrators about the push incident went unanswered. Someone even started a rumor that Emily had staged the whole thing for attention, an ugly, cruel lie that began showing up in anonymous online comments and YouTube shorts dissecting the incident. Hashtags like #wheelchairdrama and #pushorplay began trending for all the wrong reasons. Even the support she once felt from the student body seemed to splinter. Some still stood by her, but others were clearly growing tired of the controversy, muttering things like, "Just let it go already," in passing. That's when Emily started to suspect the unthinkable. Maybe someone close to her wasn't being honest. Maybe someone she trusted was feeding information to the wrong people. And there was one moment that confirmed her gut suspicion. She overheard Jasmine on a phone call outside the art room, her voice low, anxious, not like her usual self. Emily didn't catch much, just a few words. "No. She doesn't know. I'm not going to tell her yet." When Emily asked her about it later, Jasmine brushed it off, claiming she was talking to her mom. But her eyes didn't match her words. For the first time, Emily began to feel alone. Completely. And if Jasmine was hiding something, then who could she turn to? That night, she received another anonymous message. This time, it wasn't a note, it was a text. No number. Just a message on a private messenger app she didn't recognize. It said, "The person you trust most is the one holding the truth." Along with it came a photo attachment. When she opened it, her heart nearly stopped. It was a screenshot of the missing hallway footage. But only one frame. It showed Jason and someone else. Someone just out of focus, standing behind Emily at the exact moment of the push. But who that person was, and why the school never mentioned a second figure, remains the biggest question of all. And now, everything is about to unravel. Just as Emily was trying to process the grainy screenshot, the blurred figure frozen in that haunting hallway frame, another shockwave rippled through the already fractured calm. That very same evening, Jasmine received an anonymous message too. It arrived as an email with no subject, sent to her personal account, not her school one. At first, she assumed it was spam until she opened the attachment. It was a scanned page from what looked like an old disciplinary record, the kind students never had access to. But this one wasn't about Emily or Jason. It was about Jasmine herself. Dated 3 years ago. A suspension from her old school in 9th grade, just before she transferred. The reason? Altercation resulting in injury to peer. Internal investigation closed, without charges. Jasmine had never told anyone about this, not even Emily. She'd worked hard to bury that past, believing it had no bearing on her life anymore. But someone had clearly gone digging, and now it was out in the open. The file ended with one sentence in bold red ink, stamped by the school district. Confidential. Do not disclose to future institutions. Jasmine's hands shook as she stared at the screen. That fight had been a painful chapter of her life, an incident that started over a misunderstanding and escalated into something far worse. And while she hadn't pushed that girl intentionally, the fallout had nearly ended her chance of staying in school. She'd been given a second chance when her parents moved her to this new district. But now it was all at risk. Someone was sending a clear message: stay silent or we expose you. The timing was no coincidence. Whoever was pulling the strings knew Jasmine was helping Emily, and they were playing dirty. That realization shook her trust in everything, including Emily. Because how would Emily react if she found out Jasmine hadn't always been as innocent as she seemed? Meanwhile, Emily dug deeper into the single frame of the surveillance screenshot. She tried enhancing the blurry figure, using free online editing tools and AI filters from trending YouTube tutorials on image clarity. But even after hours of zooming, sharpening, and color correcting, the figure remained obscured, just enough to frustrate but not enough to solve. She showed it to her older brother, Marcus, a junior in college who majored in digital media. He examined the pixels and pointed out something Emily had noticed. The timestamp on the image didn't match the school's original narrative. The frame was from 3 minutes after the time they'd claimed the incident occurred, which meant either the school gave out false information or they were covering up what happened afterward. That 3-minute gap suddenly felt enormous, like a void where the truth was hiding. Marcus, now personally invested, suggested they look into the security system itself. After doing some digging on forums and TikTok breakdowns about public school surveillance systems, they realized most schools outsource their camera monitoring to third-party vendors. One of those companies, SecureView Systems, handled the feeds for their district. A quick Google search led to a Reddit thread titled SecureView Cover-Ups. What they don't want you to know. A rabbit hole of speculation, including stories of footage disappearing, systems malfunctioning at convenient times, and administrators claiming ignorance. What if their school wasn't just failing to protect Emily, but actively participating in a larger effort to bury the truth? That idea hung heavy as Emily replayed the moment over and over in her mind. It felt like she was stuck in a maze. Every path led to more questions. And now, Jasmine was pulling away. She claimed she was just overwhelmed, busy with family stuff, but Emily could sense the shift. The phone calls were shorter, the messages slower. And then came the worst moment yet. Jasmine confronted her outside the gym after school, voice strained, saying maybe they were doing more harm than good by digging into the past. That maybe it was better to move on. Emily felt the air punch out of her lungs. After everything, Jasmine was giving up? But it wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that Jasmine was scared. Not just for Emily, but for herself. Something or someone had gotten to her. That was when Emily decided to go it alone. No more waiting for the school. No more hoping someone would do the right thing. If she wanted answers, she'd have to find them herself, even if it meant going where she wasn't supposed to. That weekend, she snuck into the administrative building during the school's community open house. Most people were outside watching the pep rally, but Emily knew the staff offices would be unlocked for tour groups. She waited, pretending to browse trophies and bulletin boards until the hallway cleared, then slipped behind the staff-only door. She found the records room easily, but it wasn't empty. Sitting behind the desk was Coach Renner. He looked up, startled, but didn't ask what she was doing there. Instead, he simply said, "You're not going to find what you're looking for here." Emily froze. "How do you know what I'm looking for?" Coach Renner gave a tired sigh, running his hand down his face like someone who had carried a secret too long. "Because I was there that day," he said. "And I've been waiting for someone to ask the right question." But before Emily could ask what he meant, before she could even breathe, someone else stepped into the doorway behind her. It wasn't another teacher. It wasn't a student. It was Jason. And he wasn't alone. Emily didn't know whether to run or stand her ground. Jason's eyes weren't filled with guilt, confusion, or even remorse. They were cold, unnervingly calm, like he was expecting her. And the man standing behind him wasn't a student. He was older, maybe in his 30s, dressed too cleanly to be staff, too well kept to be mistaken for a parent. He had a badge clipped to his belt, but it wasn't the school's. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Coach Renner looked between them and, for the first time since she'd known him, he looked afraid. Not surprised, afraid. That split second of hesitation told Emily everything she needed to know. Whatever she had just stumbled into wasn't about some isolated schoolyard incident. It was something bigger, something adults were trying desperately to keep buried. Coach Renner mumbled something about needing to grab paperwork and slipped out the side door, leaving Emily alone in that too-quiet office with Jason and the stranger. Jason stepped closer, his voice just above a whisper. "You're playing with matches in a room full of gasoline, Emily. You don't know what you're doing." There wasn't anger in his voice, just eerie certainty. And before she could ask what that meant, the older man stepped forward, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You should go home," he said softly, but with an unmistakable undertone of warning. "Let this go. For your safety."
Emily didn't speak. She didn't argue.
She just nodded, turned around and walked out, heart pounding so loud it drowned out every thought in her head. The next 3 days were a blur of fear and paranoia. Everywhere Emily went, she felt eyes on her. Not the casual glances of classmates or staff, but something more pointed, more focused. The kind of stares you feel before you even see them. The same black sedan was parked across the street from her house 2 days in a row. She saw it again outside the library when she went to meet Marcus, and again idling down the street near Jasmine's neighborhood. She told herself it was probably nothing. Maybe she was being dramatic, reading into things because her nerves were already shot. But that theory shattered completely the moment Jasmine stopped replying to her texts. At first, Emily chalked it up to stress. Then she tried calling straight to voicemail. That night, Jasmine's mom answered the landline, voice tight and distracted. "She's not home," she said quickly. "She's visiting her aunt for a few days. No, I don't know when she'll be back." But there was something off in her tone. Too rehearsed, too rushed. Jasmine had never once mentioned an aunt before, and she wasn't the type to ghost people without a reason. Emily barely slept that night. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps. Every car that passed made her jump. She knew something was wrong. Not just with Jasmine, but with the entire situation. It had stopped being about bullying or school politics. This was something darker. Her brother tried to reassure her, telling her not to panic, that maybe Jasmine really was just taking time to breathe. But Emily could see the worry in his face, the way he checked the locks on their doors twice before bed. Even Marcus, logical, steady Marcus, couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The following morning, they found a manila envelope on their porch. No address, no stamp, no return label. Just one word written in black marker across the front. Stop. Inside was a printout of Jasmine's old school record, the one she received in that anonymous email. Only now, the file had been marked up in red ink. Arrows pointing to phrases like injury to peer and closed without charges, with the words next scrawled at the bottom. But that wasn't the worst part. Tucked into the envelope was a second photo, one of Emily, taken from behind while she sat at the library computer, time-stamped just 2 days earlier. Someone had been following her, watching her, documenting her every move. It was no longer a warning. It was a threat. Emily stared at the photo until her vision blurred. Every instinct told her to stop, to back away before things got worse. But deep down, she knew the only way out was through. Someone was trying to scare her into silence, and Jasmine's sudden disappearance was proof they weren't bluffing. This wasn't just about protecting reputations or avoiding lawsuits. It was about keeping secrets that someone was willing to guard with intimidation, and maybe worse. With Marcus now fully in her corner, they started looking into every name connected to SecureView systems and anyone with access to the surveillance footage. They pulled public records, followed paper trails, even cross-referenced school board members with recent lawsuits. The deeper they dug, the more tangled the web became. The same vendor provided surveillance systems for multiple districts across the state, and 2 years ago, A similar case involving a student injury had mysteriously disappeared from the news cycle after an internal investigation. The same name popped up again and again: Vincent J. Adler, a former law enforcement officer turned private security consultant. The man who was with Jason in the office. The revelation chilled Emily to her core. Adler's company was being hired not just for security, but for silence. Their job wasn't to protect students. It was to protect institutions. And now, that machinery had turned its focus on her. Emily was in too deep, and she knew it. But she also knew something else. Jason wasn't just a pawn in this. He knew more than he let on. Maybe he had been forced to lie. Maybe he was a victim, too. Or maybe he was something much worse. And just when Emily thought she couldn't be pulled any deeper, her phone buzzed. A new message from a blocked number. No words, just the live location ping. It was Jasmine's phone. And it was moving. Emily froze as the live ping from Jasmine's phone continued to move across the screen. It was heading away from town, out toward the wooded stretch of back roads where cell reception thinned and streetlights were few and far between. She and Marcus jumped into his car without thinking, speeding past stop signs and merging onto the rural highway as twilight deepened into night. For 10 agonizing minutes, they watched the move steadily until it suddenly stopped. On an unmarked road with no houses, no buildings, just a worn gravel path curling into the woods. They pulled over, headlights cutting through the overgrowth, and followed the signal by foot. Emily's heart thudded louder than the crunch of gravel beneath their sneakers. It wasn't just adrenaline. It was something darker, something she couldn't yet explain. At the end of the path, beneath the eerie creak of wind in the trees, they found an old maintenance shed. Rusted, padlocked, long abandoned, or so it looked. The lock had been recently cut. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and something else Emily couldn't name. The flashlight beam caught scattered debris, a broken chair, a tarp, and beneath it, Jasmine's phone. Just the phone. No sign of Jasmine. But there was something else tucked underneath the device, a photo. Not a current one, an old-school yearbook picture. Not of Jasmine. Of Emily. Marcus held it up, confused. "Why would this be here?" he whispered. Emily took the photo and flipped it over. On the back, written in the same blocky handwriting as the stop envelope, were 2 words: she lied. At first, it didn't make sense.
Who lied?
About what? But then a memory clawed its way to the surface. An old conversation, something Jasmine had said months ago and quickly brushed off. About how her previous school had messed up her records, how she'd been unfairly blamed for something that wasn't her fault. At the time, Emily hadn't questioned it. Jasmine was confident, outspoken, tough when she needed to be, but also fiercely guarded. Now, staring at the yearbook photo and the ominous message, Emily began to wonder what else Jasmine had kept hidden. They took the phone and drove back to Marcus's garage, where he cracked into it using software he swore was only for ethical purposes. The files loaded slowly, but among the messages and apps was a voice memo, timestamped 2 days before Jasmine disappeared. Emily played it, her fingers shaking. Jasmine's voice came through, strained, hurried. "If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident. And it's not just the school. There's someone else. Someone who knows what I did, what we did. Emily doesn't remember, but I do. And if she finds out, she'll never look at me the same." Emily stared at the screen, her mind spinning. What we did? What could Jasmine possibly mean? She racked her brain for anything from their past that might connect, but nothing stood out, until another file popped up. A video. Low resolution, shaky footage, clearly taken with a hidden phone camera. It was footage from the school cafeteria, dated over a year ago. Emily leaned in, squinting. There she was, sitting at a lunch table with Jason. Jasmine approached, then sat next to them. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until a 4th figure entered the frame. Coach Renner. He was whispering something to Jasmine, leaning in just a bit too close, handing her a folded piece of paper before walking away. Jason glanced nervously between them. Then the video cut. No context, no audio. But the implication was chilling. Emily had no memory of this exchange. She didn't remember the paper, the interaction, none of it. She asked Marcus to rewind it again.
And again.
Each time, that feeling of unease grew stronger. And then, the biggest crack in everything she thought she knew broke wide open. As Marcus checked the metadata on the video, he muttered something under his breath. Emily turned to look. "This video was taken from your old phone," he said slowly. "The one you lost last year." The room went cold. Emily hadn't thought about that phone in months. She dropped it during a field trip and never found it again. She assumed someone picked it up and kept it, or maybe it had been lost in the river near the hiking trail. But now, here was proof it hadn't been lost. It had been taken. Used. And the video wasn't just a random file. It had been planted in Jasmine's phone, only to be found now, under precisely the right circumstances.
But why?
Emily sat back, her hands clammy. A different kind of fear took root in her chest, not of whoever was following her now, but of the realization that she was somehow part of this conspiracy long before she even knew it existed. Jasmine had said she didn't remember. But what if she did remember, and had chosen to forget? Then her phone buzzed again. Another message from a blocked number. "You're looking in the wrong direction. Start with yourself." Emily's hands went numb. Because now, for the first time, she wasn't just questioning Jasmine or Jason or Coach Renner. She was questioning herself.
Emily didn't sleep that night.
The message haunted her, looping in her mind like a broken record. Start with yourself. It wasn't just a threat anymore. It was a dare, a calculated push into a psychological corner where even memory couldn't be trusted. For the first time since this nightmare began, she found herself questioning not just the people around her, but the very foundation of her own reality. What if there were pieces of this puzzle locked away inside her, pieces she had buried so deeply she no longer knew they existed? What if she had seen something, done something, or said something that had triggered all of this without even realizing it? That terrifying question now echoed louder than all the others. What if this didn't happen to her? What if it started with her? She couldn't carry the weight alone anymore. Marcus had been her anchor through all of this, but even he didn't know everything. Not about the hallucinations she started having after the accident. Not about the therapy sessions she stopped going to when she couldn't deal with the invasive questions. Not about the gaps in her memory that weren't just normal forgetfulness. They were voids. And now, with everything unraveling so violently, she needed answers, even if they tore her apart. That morning, she made the decision to confront the one person she believed had nothing to hide, her mother. The conversation began gently, over coffee, with shaky hands and a forced calm. Emily asked her mother to tell her about the months after the accident, about the therapy, the school changes, the late nights when Emily had trouble sleeping. Her mother paused for too long. That hesitation alone was its own confession. And when she finally spoke, it felt like the floor beneath Emily's feet had vanished. There had been an incident after the accident, something not in medical records, not in school files. A confrontation between Emily and another student during a summer camp she'd attended for physical rehabilitation. The student had accused Emily of pushing her down a slope in her wheelchair. Emily had denied it, but the staff was divided. One claimed Emily had a temper, the other said she was being framed. The incident was hushed, labeled a conflict stemming from trauma, and the camp agreed not to document it formally in exchange for a quiet exit. Hours later, while pacing the sidewalk outside the district office where SecureView Systems was supposedly headquartered, Emily received another message, this time not from an unknown number. It was from Coach Renner.
Short. Direct.
Meet me at the stadium. 9 p.m. No phones. It felt like a trap, but also like her only way forward. With Jasmine still missing, Jason avoiding her, and her mother no longer a neutral party, Emily didn't have the luxury of avoiding danger. So she went. The stadium was dark, lit only by the flickering amber of the emergency lights along the field perimeter. Coach Renner stood near the locker room entrance, arms crossed, visibly tense. He looked like a man holding too much and ready to crack. Without wasting time, he started talking. He confirmed what she had feared. Jasmine had approached him weeks ago, asking questions about the incident, the footage, and more importantly, about Emily. Not Jason. Not the administration. Emily. Jasmine had discovered the footage didn't begin with a shove. It began minutes earlier, with a heated conversation between Emily and Jason that had somehow been cut from every copy released. She had been trying to track down the raw, uncut footage when she vanished. Coach Renner's voice broke as he explained the rest. He had worked with SecureView before, had seen how they manipulated footage, how they trained staff to curate narratives during student investigations. He had kept quiet, told himself it was about protecting the school's image until now. But before Emily could press him for more, before she could even process what he was saying, he handed her an envelope. Inside was a thumb drive and a letter. The drive, he claimed, had a backup copy of the full footage. The letter? It was from Jason. "I'm sorry," the note began, "but this is bigger than either of us. If you open the footage, you won't be able to come back from it. Not just because of what's in it, but because of what it means. They'll know. You'll be watched. You'll be hunted. You'll have to decide. Do you want the truth, or do you want to live free from this forever?" Emily held the envelope in her lap all night, staring at it under the glow of her desk lamp. The ultimatum had never been clearer. Open the footage and risk exposure, not just to herself, but to a force that had already made people disappear. Or destroy it, pretend she never got this far, and try to rebuild a normal life, whatever that meant now. But as the sun began to rise, she saw something that made the choice even harder. A trending YouTube short, shared by thousands under the hashtag #UncoverJefferson, showing stills of Jasmine's missing poster and another, more recent photo that no one had seen yet. It was Jasmine alive. And she was with someone Emily recognized. Someone she had never expected to see again. Someone who had been gone for years, long presumed dead after the accident. Her father. Emily felt like the air had been vacuumed out of the room. Her eyes couldn't stop replaying the image frozen on her screen. Jasmine, standing under the glare of a street lamp, face half-shadowed, eyes wide, haunted. But it wasn't just the shock of seeing her alive that sent ice through her spine. It was who stood next to her. The man with salt and pepper hair, sunken eyes, and the unmistakable scar that curved over his temple. Her father. He had been presumed dead. A fatal car crash, they said. A tragedy that had almost broken her mother. That had certainly broken Emily. But he wasn't dead. He was alive. And not just alive, he was hiding. Hiding with Jasmine.
Why?
Everything unraveled at once, like a dam bursting in her brain. Emily's father had been the original tech director for the district surveillance system rollout years ago. Back before SecureView even had a name. He was one of the architects. She remembered hearing snippets of conversations late at night, her parents arguing about ethics, privacy, and school politics. He didn't trust the people they were working with. Said it would turn into something dangerous. And then one night, he was gone. The crash happened in another city, in another state. There was no body. Just a burnt vehicle and a closed casket. At the time, her mother insisted it was better not to look too closely. For peace, she said. Emily never questioned it, until now. Fueled by adrenaline and betrayal, Emily rushed back to her laptop and plugged in the thumb drive Coach Renner had given her. The footage started the same: school courtyard, students chatting, Jason walking briskly. But what came before that, the few minutes leading up to the push, was where the truth shattered everything. The angle showed Jason slipping something into Jasmine's backpack. A small black device. Not visible from other cameras. Moments later, Jasmine confronts him, visibly upset, and that's when Emily enters the scene. She steps between them, tension rising, clearly unaware of what's unfolding. Then the push happens, not intentional, not malicious. Jasmine backs up, trips over a small divider, and falls. But the camera angle that went public made it look far more aggressive. SecureView had doctored the timeline, removed the context, and turned it into a clean, headline-ready narrative. But that wasn't the worst part. In the corner of the frame, almost imperceptible unless you were looking for it, stood someone else. A man in a black coat, arms crossed, watching. A man who bore a haunting resemblance to the person Emily had just seen in the YouTube clip, her father. That meant he'd been there, at the school, watching it unfold. Emily's heart pounded as she replayed the footage, frame by frame. Every part of her wanted to scream, cry, break something. Her father hadn't just faked his death, he'd been actively involved in this. But was he protecting her, or was he orchestrating something bigger? She needed answers. And she knew exactly where to get them. Coach Renner. But when she called, there was no answer. Instead, a deep automated voice answered. This number is no longer in service. A chill rolled through her. She raced to the stadium, the last place she'd seen him, only to find his office cleared out. Files gone. Desk empty. The door locked and sealed with a notice, administrative leave pending investigation. Someone had silenced him. In a panic, she called Marcus, her oldest friend, the one person she could still trust. But even he didn't sound like himself. His voice trembled as he told her, "Emily, you need to stop. They came to my house.
2 men.
Said if I kept helping you, I'd end up like Coach." When she begged for clarity, he hesitated, then whispered, "This isn't just about the school. It's government. Contracts. Testing tech on students. Your dad tried to stop it. He went underground to expose it. That push on Jasmine? It was bait. To flush him out. And now they know you're involved." Emily dropped her phone, breath shallow. None of this was ever about a student altercation. It was about control, surveillance, experimentation. The school was a testing ground for a broader plan, real-time behavioral manipulation through AI-monitored surveillance, pushed through under the guise of school safety. Her father had discovered the manipulation years ago, and when he threatened to go public, he was killed and erased. But he hadn't stopped fighting. He had just gone dark.
And Jasmine?
She must have uncovered something that connected the dots, something so big, so dangerous, that even SecureView's parent company couldn't risk it surfacing. The wind howled through the bare trees as Emily stood at the edge of her childhood driveway, staring at the dimly lit house that once held her happiest memories, now warped by secrets too heavy to carry. Her hands trembled, not just from the cold, but from the weight of what she knew waited inside. Every step forward felt like she was walking deeper into a story someone else had written for her, with pieces of truth scattered just enough to lure her here. She could still remember her father's voice reading bedtime stories on that porch, never imagining he'd someday fake his death and become the shadow behind one of the darkest conspiracies hiding in plain sight. Inside, the house smelled like dust and old paper. Familiar furniture was draped in sheets, and the silence was sharp. Then, a creak from the hallway. Emily turned quickly, her breath caught, and out stepped her father. He looked older than she remembered, lines heavier, eyes darker, guilt etched into every inch of his face. "You found me," he said, voice low and hesitant. But she didn't speak, not yet. She needed to know everything, no more shadows, no more codes. Just truth. "Jasmine's alive," she finally said, voice firm. "And you've been part of this the whole time." He nodded slowly and gestured for her to sit. What followed was the unraveling of years of deception. The SecureView program wasn't just a school safety tool, it was a prototype for mass psychological manipulation, using real-time facial analysis and behavior tracking to predict and ultimately influence student actions. Emily's father had been one of the original designers, and when he discovered the military-grade enhancements being quietly inserted into the system, software designed to test emotional thresholds and break points in adolescence, he tried to blow the whistle. But the company, backed by federal defense contractors, was ready for that. They orchestrated the accident, burned the records, paid off the right people. He only survived because Jasmine's mother, a whistleblower herself, warned him just in time. Jasmine had discovered part of this herself when she stumbled on encrypted data files buried in her school-issued tablet, her name flagged in red, her behavioral patterns labeled non-compliant. That confrontation between her and Jason had nothing to do with bullying. It was about him acting under pressure to plant a transmitter. But the plan had gone wrong, and the fall that followed, however unintentional, became the perfect smokescreen. SecureView wiped the footage, twisted the narrative, and painted Emily as the aggressor. Not to punish her, but to monitor her. Because they suspected she might know too much. Emily stood abruptly, fury building in her chest. So, you just left us? Let Mom grieve a ghost while you hid. Her father looked down, ashamed, but before he could answer, the front door crashed open. Armed figures stormed in, men in black tactical gear, faces obscured. Emily was grabbed before she could run, but her father didn't fight. He simply raised his hands and whispered, "She's the key, not me." One of the masked figures leaned close to Emily, and though she couldn't see his face, the voice was unmistakable. Marcus. Her friend. The betrayal stung sharper than anything yet. "You helped them," she spat. But Marcus's voice cracked. "I didn't have a choice. They have my brother. They said if I got you here, he'd be safe." The leader motioned for Emily to be restrained, but that's when her father moved. He lunged, not for a weapon, but for the control panel beneath the bookshelf. One Emily hadn't noticed until now. A panel that, once triggered, sent every file, every video, every transcript to a massive digital drive, already syncing to public servers. Sirens echoed outside before the leader could shoot. Through the windows, red and blue lights spun as federal agents swarmed the property. In the chaos, Marcus yanked Emily free, and they dove behind the couch as a stun grenade exploded in the foyer. The house shook. Her father shielded the upload drive with his body. Shots rang out. Screams. And then silence. When Emily crawled out, coughing through the smoke, her father was gone. Either dead or taken. The drive was smashed, but not before the final sync had completed. Hours later, the videos were everywhere. TikTok, YouTube, Reddit. Hashtags like #SchoolSpyware, #SecureViewScandal, and #Surveillancetruth exploded across platforms. The footage showed everything: the lies, the fake bullying video, the hidden military software. News outlets couldn't ignore it. Congressional hearings began within days. People demanded justice. But the final twist came when Emily received a letter. No return address. Just a small envelope with a flash drive and a note. "There's more. And it goes higher than you think." She opened the drive and saw something chilling. A new list of flag students. Not from her school. Not even from her state. A nationwide pilot. And at the top of the list was her name. Again. The story wasn't over. It had only just begun. The smoke had cleared, but the scars remained. Emily stood on the steps of Capitol Hill 6 months later, gripping the edges of her statement with trembling fingers. Reporters swarmed outside like wasps, cameras blinking, microphones thrust forward. Inside, the hearing room buzzed with tension. Whistleblowers, parents, educators, privacy advocates. Everyone was waiting to hear what she would say. But Emily didn't care about headlines anymore. This wasn't about trending hashtags or viral moments. This was about closure. About honoring the people who had been silenced. About finally reclaiming the truth from a system that had tried so hard to bury it under fear and fake narratives. She adjusted the mic, looked straight into the eyes of the committee members, and began telling the story, her story, with the raw, unfiltered honesty of someone who had nothing left to lose. The SecureView program had been quietly dismantled under the public eye, thanks to the explosive leak Emily and her father had triggered. Lawsuits flooded in from every direction. Families learned their children had been tracked and tested without consent. The idea that something as innocent as a school-issued tablet had been weaponized against kids shook the entire country. Congressional committees held long, grueling hearings. CEOs resigned under pressure. Investigators combed through every inch of the algorithm, uncovering layers of manipulation that went far beyond anyone's worst fears. There were even talks of criminal charges, although justice, Emily learned, was rarely as swift or clean as people wanted it to be. And her father, whether he had escaped that night or was buried in a secret government cell, remained an unsolved question that gnawed at the edges of her peace. But the strangest part wasn't the collapse of a billion-dollar surveillance empire. It was the way the world moved on. Attention shifted. New scandals erupted. Trending keywords like #StudentSurveillance and #WhistleblowerTruth were slowly buried under celebrity gossip and political outrage. The public's memory, like its empathy, had a short shelf life. Emily found herself back in school, trying to live a version of normal she barely recognized. People treated her like she was either dangerous or famous, never simply human. Friends avoided her in hallways, unsure how to talk to the girl who exposed a national secret. Teachers spoke carefully around her, like one wrong word would end up on the evening news. Even Marcus, who had risked so much, kept his distance. His brother had been released, but the guilt never left his face. Still, in the quiet hours between midnight and sunrise, Emily would sit with her laptop open, scrolling through the files again. Not because she didn't believe what happened, but because she had to keep reminding herself it was real. Jasmine, now officially off the grid, sent the occasional encrypted message through a private server. Short notes, always vague, but they let Emily know she was alive and watching. One message in particular stood out. "The system isn't dead. It's just gone deeper underground." That line stayed with her. Every time she walked past a camera, swiped a school badge, or saw a drone buzz by overhead, she wondered what new version of SecureView was already in place, just under a different name, maybe dressed up as AI learning tools or predictive safety metrics. Surveillance never really died. It adapted, hid behind convenience, and waited. As for the final twist, it didn't come as a dramatic reveal or a final betrayal. It came in the form of a school board flyer tucked under Emily's windshield one morning. Harmless at first glance, until she flipped it over. A symbol, just like the one she saw in the hidden code months ago. A faint QR code next to it, almost invisible. When scanned, it didn't lead to a website. It led to an audio file. A child's voice. One she didn't recognize. Reading off names.
Cities.
Status reports. It wasn't over. The network was still running. Rebranded. Refined.
Smarter.
Emily didn't panic. She didn't cry. She simply closed the file, locked it away, and took a breath. The world was different now. People had seen the truth. Some had forgotten, yes, but others hadn't. And as long as someone was watching the watchers, there was hope. She wasn't the scared girl who just wanted to clear her name anymore. She was something else now. A symbol, maybe. A reminder that even in a world addicted to control, one voice, one truth, could still burn the whole thing down. And somewhere in the distance, as night fell and streetlights flickered on like digital eyes, a single security camera blinked and turned away from her. Just for a second. Almost like it remembered who she was. And maybe that was enough.
For now.